I'm using the Latin text for the Stations of the Cross, and I'm setting it to music. Like Italian for opera, Latin seems the natural language for sacred music. And even today in this secular age, people are drawn to Gregorian chant even because they find it so contemplative and innately peaceful and spiritual. Sacred music will always be here, because nothing can replace it.
Saint Augustin said that music is given by God's generosity to mortals, having rational souls in order to lead them to higher things. We are joined today by Mr. Patrick Cassidy, the Irish Catholic composer, whose music you've heard on movies like Hannibal, Kingdom of Heaven, and Calvary, who recently composed a mass for organ and choir, and whose piece, Proclamation, was played at the inauguration of Joe Biden in 2021. Mr. Patrick Cassidy, thank you for joining.
Augustin, it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. We're very glad to have you on the channel. So for a start, you are a Catholic, but can you tell us a bit more about your religious background? Were you born into the faith?
Yes, my father was deeply religious, and my late father, but I inherited from him Catholicism, but also a love of music. He absolutely loved music more than anybody I've ever met. He was a pharmacist by profession. And but his passion was music, and I'm so grateful he gave me both things. He gave me my Catholic faith, and he also, I inherited from him also my great love of music.
Did he play an instrument, or?
He was an amateur. He played the violin, but he was a good violinist. But he had his first lesson when he was 14 because he came from a very rural part of Ireland where there weren't opportunities. And, I think he was very then diligent about making sure that all of his children would have an opportunity to start at an early age and have an opportunity in music for that reason.
Recently, you composed an amazing mass for organ and choir, and there is also a version of it for strings with the London Symphonic Orchestra. Can you tell us a bit more about this musical adventure?
I'd always known that I would at some time write a mass during my career. And, for me, music is innately spiritual. And so many of my favorite compositions in the history of classical music have been liturgical pieces, whether that's from Bach, Handel, Mozart, right to Beethoven. And writing the mass was something then I actually had discussed with my own father. We discussed the idea, and sometime after he passed away, then I felt I should write this, and it's dedicated to him. And in a way, writing the mass became a reflection on my own existence and my own spirituality. So it was a personal journey and a spiritual journey. I chose the Latin text because, like Italian for opera, Latin seems the natural language for sacred music. It is universal, it is timeless, and deeply musical. And the other thing, I wanted the mass to also reflect our own age, because I think composers in the past have written masses, but there's been a continuity in that they look backwards, but they also look to the future. And my mass, I hope it sounds like it was written today rather than 100 years ago. And I also then would hope that people of faith would be drawn to it. Also, people would be drawn to it from their love of beauty or from a desire for peace.
It does sound amazing, but was it ever played during an actual Holy Mass, during the sacrament?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Amazingly, the organ version of the Mass was recorded during COVID at First Congregational Church in Los Angeles, which is a Protestant church. And they did one movement. There are 16 movements in the Mass. They did one movement each Sunday for 16 weeks. But then then after COVID, then we did a concert of the entire Mass. But it's never been performed during a Holy Mass. No, it hasn't. And that that would be a nice thing if that could happen sometime. Yes.
Okay, well, I hope to see it one day then.
Okay.
because I've heard some musical masses that you've quoted from the 19th century, for instance, were mostly meant to be played apart from the actual mass. It wasn't actually meant to be played during the Holy Mass. But how did you combine actually liturgy and music to make it one day, I hope, possible to be played during an actual Mass?
Amazingly, the text of the sung Mass has remained constant. And
Yes.
you know, even in the older Mass, the Tridentine Mass, the sung Mass is exactly the same as it is in the new Mass, the New Latin Mass. And so that was a great thing, because I had all of these great masses from history to look at when I was writing my own Mass, and I felt very small. I was standing, I was a shadow amongst all these giants, in the shadow of these great giants of music, and which was very daunting. But I felt I had something new to bring to it myself. I mean, for example, it is the first symphonic Mass by an Irish composer in Latin, and
Wow.
so at least that was something new.
Yes. Well, congratulations.
Yeah.
And you've composed both profane, we're going to talk about that, and sacred music. What are your different inspirations and maybe methods to make music stand out as sacred?
Oh, well, you know, I've written sacred music. I've written opera, film scores. In all of my music, I think there's a continuity and a style, and I'm always drawn towards the humanity, and the human voice always seems to play some part in it. Even if the director doesn't want something with the human voice, I try to sneak in something on the end titles, and so I've always been drawn to that. I remember as a child, actually, for Christmas, I was given a recording of Handel's Messiah, and I was quite young, but I just loved it, and ever since then, I have just been drawn to liturgical music, and it is my favorite form of music, and so that's my background, and that's who I am.
And you're talking about the voices. It makes me think that you made also an album with Lisa Gerrard, which sounds very liturgical as well, very profound.
Yes, that was great. Actually, I went to Lisa's from Australia.
Okay.
Yes, but her father is Irish. He actually travelled to Australia when he was a young man. There was a scheme whereby the British government paid, I think it was £10 for people to go to Australia and settle there to work, because they were trying to populate this place. And so Lisa grew up in Australia, and in Melbourne. In Melbourne, it's a great melting pot. You have people from the Middle East, people from Britain, all over the world. A lot of people even from Greece, places like that, the Balkans in general. And Lisa was exposed to all of this music growing up. So her own musical language is very, well, it has a lot of ethnic influences from a lot of different places. And but when I worked with her on the album Immortal Memory, Lisa's deeply spiritual as well. And we wanted to make it a very much a spiritual album. And one of the pieces we did was Maranatha, Come Lord, and also we did the Lord's Prayer in Aramaic. And that was the most challenging track, and it's probably the one I'm most proud of and feel most drawn to. I think Lisa unlocked something in that, but we did together, I hope. Yes.
And in 2001, you composed the famous Vide Cor Meum, one of the greatest pieces of contemporary music from a sonnet by Dante. It was for Ridley Scott's Hannibal. How did it happen? How did you get on the movie?
Oh, it's quite a story. I'd only recently arrived in Los Angeles, and I was working at Hans Zimmer's studio.
Mm-hmm.
And Hans at the time was working on Gladiator, and he was the composer who was employed to do the score for Hannibal. And now Hans knew that I had a background in choral music, and he asked me to write it. And originally, I think the studio didn't even want the scene because he said, "Oh, opera is boring. Why bother with that scene?" But Ridley was insisting on it, and so they were looking for a piece that would be 50 seconds or 40 seconds. I can't remember. So I wrote a sketch, and I sent it to Ridley, and Ridley loved it, and he said, "Can you make it longer?" And so I made it 2.5 minutes, and I remember going to Florence when they shot the scene, which was a great experience. And I met Anthony Hopkins, hung out with him, which was a real joy. And then when the movie was finished, in post-production, Ridley asked me if I would write a longer version of the piece for the end titles. So that's where Vita Carmeum came from. And then later on, I decided to write an entire opera on Dante, which was premiered in Germany last summer. And that fulfilled a lifelong ambition as well, to write an opera and have it premiered. So that was special.
And yes. Can we expect an album of the whole Dante's opera?
Yes, well, at the moment I'm working on trying to get a second production in Italy, and I think we're well on our way to getting a second production. And I think when we get the second production, I'll then look at maybe trying to make an album at that stage of the whole piece. Yes.
Awesome. And it's the first time, I think, that Dante was adapted as an opera, as a full opera.
Yeah, it's astonishing, but nobody had come up with this idea, which made it perfect for me, because I always like to do things that haven't been done before. And I actually couldn't believe it. And when I talk to people about the opera, they say, "Are you quite sure Dante has never been set to music before?" Well, no, he hasn't. Yeah, and I also made a love story, because rather than having the 3 canticles, which are Inferno, Purgatorio, and Paradiso, I decided to start it in Dante's first book, La Vita Nuova, which is a deeply spiritual book. And in this book, he meets Beatrice. Beatrice dies at a young age. And then that is the first act, and that leads into the second act, where Dante, he writes the Divine Comedy, La Divina Commedia, in her honor. And the opera ends when Dante and Beatrice meet again at the gates of paradise, and we have a reprise there of Vita Carmeum, and Dante finds his Beatrice after his arduous journey through the Inferno and Purgatory.
So you had to read the whole thing, right? You had to get familiar with the text.
Yeah, and I also had to learn the Italian language as well to really understand it. And so my Italian is not perfect by any means, but I have a good working knowledge of Italian as well, which was a necessary part of the process. So it took quite a while for me to write this opera.
As well, your Irish inspirations are obviously very clear in the Calvary score, for instance. I recently discovered the main theme was actually the Beatitudes sung in Gaelic. Is that correct?
Yes, in Gaelic, yes. Yeah.
And how did you come with this idea?
Well, I found it in an old book of Irish spiritual poetry, and I thought it was beautiful, and I thought the Beatitude suited the priest, because he is a Christ-like figure. Brendan Gleeson's character in that movie, the priest, and obviously the analogy of Calvary is very strong, and it seemed the right thing for the movie, and Gaelic is a beautiful language, and it's something that I have. I mean, I think I'm the only composer in Hollywood who can write a song in Gaelic, so so that was something I had to do for that reason alone.
And were you rather free to use Gaelic and to use voices on that score with the director, or did you have orders and
I,
rules to follow?
I enjoyed working with the director. John Michael McDonagh is the director. In fact, John Michael McDonagh was born in London, but both his parents came from Ireland. So he can see Ireland in a way that we Irish don't see it. He can see it from the outside, but he's also Irish because of his parents. But he's also English. He's both, and that brings an interesting perspective. He's able to look at Ireland, in a way and see things. He can see the wood from the trees in a sense, and he was a very good director to work with because he gave me a lot of scope, I think he understood that the best way to get something out of an artist is to give them some freedom, but he was also quite forceful on some ideas he had too. There was certain specific things he was quite insistent on. He didn't want any ethnic instruments in it, any Irish ethnic instruments. He wanted the movie to be more universal in that respect, and but he was quite open to the idea of using the Irish voice, the Gaelic voice, and I thought it worked well. And I'm very, very, very proud of that movie and everything about it. I think it's I think it's an incredible movie, actually.
It is. Both the music and the movie are amazing, and Brendan Gleeson is very good in it.
He is phenomenal. It is a tour de force by the actor. Incredible work, yes.
Yeah, it is. And you've worked also on a documentary on the Irish Revolution and on the famine tribute as well. Can you maybe tell us a bit about that?
Well, the Famine Remembrance, that was written for the 150th anniversary of the start of the Irish famine, which would have been 1847. So the performance in New York was in 97, and it was a fantastic event in New York City, and all the Irish were out to commemorate this event in Irish history. And the reason there are so many Irish people in America is because of the Irish famine. The population of Ireland before the famine was 8 million. And when I was born, the population of Ireland was north and south was 5 million. And apart from the people who died during the famine, the rest of them came to America, and it continued. It continued for generations. Even my grandfather on my mother's side, he immigrated to America, but he came back. He was actually in the American Army, and during the First World War, he had passed away before I was born, and then he came back to Ireland, and which was very unusual. I mean, people who emigrated to America generally never came back. That was a great event, and I was so happy to be and honored to be the composer to write the music for this important remembrance in New York City.
And the Peace Proclamation that you composed for the documentary on the 1916 revolution was used at the inauguration of Joe Biden in 2021. Did you attend? How did it happen?
Well, there was an Irish violinist who was asked to perform at the inauguration mass, and she had actually played the piece, the Proclamation, at the official ceremony in Ireland, at the Garden of Remembrance, which was opened by the Irish president. She had played it there, and because of that, it was her favorite piece. And she asked me, could she use it for the inauguration mass? And of course, I was delighted to have it played. And actually, I'm even more proud of the fact that my music was performed at the inauguration of the Irish president, Michael Higgins, who is a great man and a great humanitarian, a wonderful, wonderful person. And he has served as the Irish president for 14 years, and he is in his final year now. He will be stepping down in a few months' time, but he'd asked for the opening overture for the Children of Lear to be played by the Army No. 1 band for his inauguration at Dublin Castle in Ireland. That would have been a few years back, yes. And so I've had my music at 2 inaugurations.
And were you attending? Were you conducting the orchestra?
No. Well, it was the army band, so they got me up there, and it was freezing cold anyway, because they were probably standing there for a few hours before the president arrived in the courtyard of Dublin Castle. But I was watching it. I was watching a live stream. It was very exciting.
Oh, it must have been. And what are your plans and projects for the future? Do you intend to compose more religious music or to work on movies? What should we expect?
I have a movie coming up next year, and I can't say much about it because, on movies, we're not allowed to talk about.
Of course.
But I have a movie I'm working on next year, and that I'm very excited about. It's in Italy, and it's an Italian director, although the script is in English, and so I'm really looking forward to that. And I've also been working on a new liturgical piece, Via Crucis, or the Stations of the Cross, which has never been set to music. So I'm planning on having that ready for Easter, to perform it at First Church. I've become it's a Protestant church in Los Angeles, but these days the best Catholic music is usually heard in Protestant churches rather than in Catholic churches, which is a sad thing to say, but it is the truth. They would like to do it at Easter here in Los Angeles, so I'm using the Latin text for the Stations of the Cross, and I'm setting it to music, and I'm about halfway through that project as we speak.
Oh, and it has never been done before.
It has never been done before, yeah. Like Dante, I can't understand why other composers haven't come across these ideas. Yeah.
Well, thank you for doing it then.
Yeah.
And I think that the 21st century is in dire need for a beautiful Catholic music renewal, which you are participating in through your different pieces. Would you encourage other composers to follow this path, and how so?
The sacred music has always carried something larger than itself. It speaks directly to the human spirit, and I don't exactly understand why that is. And even today in this secular age, people are drawn to Gregorian chant even because they find it so contemplative and innately peaceful and spiritual. And I'm very fortunate that being a composer that I have access to this and that I can do something with it. And people long for spiritual meaning in their lives. It's an innate human thing. So most of my projects, apart from the commissioned projects, which are generally movies, are liturgical pieces. And even Dante, he's a great Catholic theologian of sorts, Dante. And so I'm drawn to this, and I'm drawn to it in a sense because of its beauty more than anything. And I happen to be a Catholic. That's also a wonderful marriage between the two things, between the beauty and what I believe. And sacred music will always be here, because nothing can replace it. And in my opinion, the greatest works in classical music, and often composers' greatest works, have been the liturgical pieces. I think Mozart's greatest piece was his Requiem. It was his final piece before he died, and I think it was his greatest work. And he surpassed even everything brilliant and great he had done before that in the Requiem, which is just a jewel. And I think the same can be said of Bach's Mass in B minor. In fact, Bach, who was a Lutheran, and most of his cantatas were written in German, but he looked on his Mass as being the culmination of his life, and he was drawn back to the Latin Mass, and I think he regarded it as his greatest work, as far as I know. And so we have these examples from history and from the great tradition of music in in the church, and it's something that will always be here, and it's irreplaceable, in my opinion.
I agree. Well,
Yeah.
Patrick Cassidy, thank you very much for coming on the channel.
It's been a real pleasure chatting with Augustin, and thank you for inviting me.